Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin. I'm delighted to say Hugh McDonald, Moira Gordon and Alison McConnell join us on the programme to talk football, domestic and slightly further afield. So we'll be talking Scotland, we'll be looking to the domestic individuals, Nicholas Kuhn, and of course Kenneth Vargas will occupy our thoughts. We'll look at some of the clubs who are facing financial difficulty and ask the question, is it a worrying trend in Scottish football? So lots to get our teeth into. Don't forget, if you hit the subscribe button on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel, you can join that ever-increasing and growing football family. And if you download the PLZ Soccer app, you'll get all that breaking news at your fingertips. So let's get into the meat and bones of Scotland. Nations League. In the end, Hugh, it was a good performance against Poland. Let's deal with that in isolation.
Yeah, a good performance against Poland. A good game as well, because a game either team could have won. I mean, it was surprisingly open for an international last game in a group. Played at a really good pace on a big pitch as well, so lots of room. And a great result. I mean, just especially getting, Scotland in this group have been denied in, the closing stages of the group games, and getting a victory is always important, particularly given the long run that preceded the Croatia game.
Yeah. Does he deserve credit? Do we see shoots of not so much recovery but positivity, Moira?
There's positivity in terms of the results, getting them there, but I think there's still going to be questions asked until it comes to a major tournament and whether they can do it there, because we've seen there's obviously the team have improved over the last few years. There are signs that we were becoming a team that believed in ourselves, or that we had the right to be at major tournaments, and then we've gone to these major tournaments, it's not worked out. So I think at the moment, we've got ourselves back on track, I would say, but in terms of a final definitive, are we definitely getting there? I think we need to actually see the end result at a major tournament, or in that kind of level and that kind of stage when it really matters, before we can actually say, yeah, we're back.
Yeah, I mean, that point, and picking up on what Moira's saying, Alison, is the difference between how the PR machine at the SFA look at things and say, well, we're all a group of negative journalists, we can't be positive about it. But you have to, in some ways, separate the performance and then the overall in context. Did we win? Did we qualify from the group? Did we achieve what we set out to do? In isolation again, I looked at the performance and I thought there was some really good football played by Scotland.
Yeah, and I think obviously there's one huge positive in Ben Doak, a boy that was denied the Euros because of injury, but you see what he offers coming in, and all of a sudden Scotland have a real threat, which is where the issues have laid. There's been a lack of any menace in a final third. All of a sudden you've got a player willing to go, and there's a fearlessness about him, attacking fullbacks, getting balls into the box. All of a sudden you've got a slight, just a bit of menace in the final third that gives you something different. But I agree with Moira, I think it's fantastic. 2 big wins. I think the win over Croatia too was notable at Hampden, but you've got to see it within the bigger picture of what it means. I think the pot 3 thing in terms of the World Cup could be significant. Qualifying for the next World Cup is a huge ask. It's a 12 group winner. From a European side, it's a 12 group winners who are going to go through. If you're in pot 3 and you come out against some pretty formidable teams, it could be a massive challenge to go and qualify. What you would say is at least you're going to go into them in a different frame of mind. You're going into them with the wind at your back rather than fighting against a sea of negativity and question marks. You're going in a fairly positive foundations that you have to build on, but I still think World Cup qualification will be really arduous for Scotland.
I agree. I think it probably just, I looked at the aftermath of the game the other night there. Nothing to fear now, was what everybody says. There's World Cup draws coming, and nothing to fear now. And you go, well, yeah, there's an awful lot of fear, because if you're really positive about what's just happened, the bottom line is we didn't qualify from this group.
But do you think he's proved the point on the basis that his argument is that I'd much rather Scotland were playing difficult countries that are testing you and giving you a real insight into the level that we have to reach, rather than playing in the lower group.
Yeah, I mean, on that, you say yes. I mean, anybody who's even in player development further down the line, if you were 15 and 16, every coach says, no, you've got to play them against hard opposition. Yeah, I get all that. But the problem with playing better opponents is that they beat you. I mean, that's the problem. And it's all right saying, oh, but we beat Croatia, and except we did, and we can put the caveats, 10-man Croatia, etc., and we've beaten Spain. Yeah. But in a group, we're going to be in a group where we are going to be seeded by not to qualify. We're seeded not to get to the playoffs.
Yeah.
This is a huge task. If you could get it lucky in the group. I mean, I know in this group, for example, that we had in Euros, there was 2 pot 1 nations that we finished behind, which is good. And you can get it lucky in a group because you can look who's in pot 1 and say, well, if we got Croatia again, would we have a chance? Not because it's an older team. Pot 2, if we get something like a Wales, you're at the whims of the draw here.
I was just about to say the opposite can happen. That you can end up with. You know, you've got Germany, you've got Spain, or you've got 2 huge.
And that's more Scotland's luck over. I mean, we don't tend to be a nation that draws out the lowest seeds above us.
I think the thing, Moira, that when you look at the teams that we have to beat to exceed expectation, it's pot 2. So pot 2 is Ukraine, Turkey, Sweden, Wales, Hungary, Serbia, Poland, Greece, Romania, Norway, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Which, I mean, if you looked at those teams and you thought to yourself, well, those are teams that you think we've got a fair chance based on what we're witnessing. Again, listen, it all goes back, Moira, we haven't got any defenders we can't score.
No, but the one thing I would say about that is that the difference under Steve Clarke is that before Steve Clarke, we might have looked at even those names and thought, well, this is tricky. I think the performances we've seen, maybe not always on, as I said earlier, at the major finals, but throughout campaigns, we've seen the odd result where we've been able to beat teams better than that.
Yeah.
So we would actually go into it with a lot more hope than we would have done pre-Steve Clarke era, I would suggest.
Yeah.
So that shows that there has been some improvement there. But it still feels sometimes with Scotland that we take, a step forward and then take a step back, and then it's like reset and go again. But I think we're resetting and going again with slightly more hope against nations and in pot 2 than we might have done. But I still think, as Alison and we've said, it's not necessarily going to be easy to qualify.
Yeah, and if there's a positive out of failing, because we ultimately failed in this group in the Nations League, Hugh, if there is a positive, is that third position allows us a playoff to retain that, first group status, Nations League especially.
I think first group status is really important because of Steve Clarke's proper, evaluation of, let's play against the best teams we can play against. And he was coming to bite him a bit in friendlies as well, as, we've played teams that normally we wouldn't played. But I think it's good for leveling raising the level of the player.
Does it raise the interest as well, Hugh?
It does raise the interest. But the other thing where it's not so good as is that sometimes you want to be in a group that you can win, because the groups that you can win can give you, as it is going to do for the World Cup, there's teams now that know that no matter what happens in the World Cup qualifying, they're in the World Cup playoffs because they've won their group, their European nations group. So it does give you that
safety
back door that we've exploited in the past.
Yeah.
So there's everything in football's 2 sides to it. I just think it's really at I agree with you, it's second place that we'd normally have to go for in playoffs. And playoffs, even getting second place, which would be an achievement. Then you've got to get through the playoffs. I'm being really... But
I think it's the hardest World Cup for a European-based team to qualify for.
The strength now in European nations, because it's we can talk about... I mean, people say, what about Norway? Norway's going to have the best centre-forward in the world playing for them, and others in the team that are of a certain capability that will match Scotland as well.
Yeah, but they had the best centre-forward in the world and didn't qualify.
Yeah, but that can happen too.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm just saying, don't
I
Don't
underestimate it.
And the other thing is, you know, that was then with Norway, our Norwegian players coming through. And as I think David said about Scotland, when we're looking at it, are a lot of our players on the other side as well? Have they peaked, and are they going down? Because the age of the profile of our squad over this 2-year qualifying process is not a squad that generally is growing into it. It's a squad. So we've got a 41-year-old goalkeeper.
Yeah, and I think that's shown in some of our results. Like when we talk about the major finals or the games that we're playing at the end of the seasons, that's the ones we're struggling in.
Yeah.
And now, is that because players have peaked and a long, arduous season, you know, you get to that point and we don't have the strength and depth to bring more in. So that's where we're struggling. But we need to have players that can last right until there. We need that.
Well, my
that
argument with that, Moira, is quite simply that the players that we are worrying about are actually playing in the top clubs. You know what I mean? I mean, Aston Villa are a top club now. There's a difference there. You've got Andy Robertson, who basically Arne Slot has taken out of the equation because he didn't get a full pre-season. And that affected his fitness. But he's still very much part of that Liverpool plan. Yeah, I take your point. I actually think, I don't know if you all agree with this, I actually think, if anything, the 2026 World Cup is what I think is the perfect point for some of the older, more experienced players. I mean, Gordon's the exception to the rule. The rest of them, 31 still, you can still play absolutely at the top flight. 31 is no age now, the way footballers keep themselves. The only problem I have with it is, and no disrespect to Grant Hanley, but Grant Hanley can't be at the World Cup. Somewhere along the line, we need to unearth somebody who can play centre half rather than this scenario where we're hoping we're going to play Kieran Tierney and 3 central defenders, and then we're going to go for guys that are, you know, barely getting minutes in their own club.
I think that's key. I think you want to be bringing players in who are playing regularly. I think sometimes what you see are tired challenges, and Grant Hanley, go back to the penalty that was conceded at Hampden. You think somebody who's not playing every week, that's the danger. I think when you're not match sharp and you're coming in and you're playing on a fairly significant stage, you're playing international football, that there's a danger you get caught with that. So my argument would be, I think you always want to go for somebody who's getting minutes. But when you say we need to unearth someone, if it was as easy as just saying, let's find someone else, you would go out and do it. The problem is there is a lack of quality in that position that is available for selection. Now, you've still got a bit of time. You also think there is a nucleus of young players, if Scotland were to qualify for the 2026 World Cup, there are a nucleus of players that you would think might come into contention for it. Thinking obviously Lennon Miller, but even David Watson at Kilmarnock, possibly Connor Barron at Rangers, boys that are starting to come to the fore, younger players. But I do think it's a very experienced squad. But I thought at the Euros what was notable was how many games players had been playing. I thought there was a lethargy about the Euros, not just in Scotland. It was a poor Euros, but across the tournament as a whole. I think you saw it maybe not just in older players, but players who are repeatedly asked to play 50, 60 games across international and domestic football, and it gets to that point of the season. I think you saw it. I think you saw the effects of it.
I agree with that, yeah.
With regards to Scotland?
Oh, I thought across the board.
Yeah.
I thought at the tournament itself, I thought there was a lethargy about certain games, certain players, certain performances.
Players as well, in certain where when you looked at their season, like if we take it away from Scotland, if you look at Harry Kane, who had a desperate Euros, I mean, if he hadn't been called Harry Kane, he wouldn't have been in the 11. And then you look at his year and you say, well, he's a human being. He's moved to Germany with his family to a new challenge. He's played 50, 60 games in the Bundesliga and the Champions League. What age is Harry? 30, round about that mark. No wonder he's run out of gas. But I think that'll be a problem that we would really love to have. Yeah. Imagine going to a World Cup and saying, how fit is John McGinsey at 32? How fit is McTominay? How fit is... That'd be a great problem. I think I think it's you don't want to... I'm not writing Scotland off because I would love to see the draw and get a really good draw. But I think people are underestimating where we are in the pecking order for this draw.
Yeah, I mean, Wouldn't it be great, Moira, if we're all back here in the Journos and we're all sitting here and I go, Moira, talk us through Austria, Greece and San Marino. Can we make it?
It'd be fantastic. I mean, that's the thing. When Steve Clarke talks about negativity, he doesn't realise that journalists are as big as fans of Scotland as anybody else. We'd love Scotland to do well. So it's not that anybody's, taking any joy in any perceived failures or real failures. It's just we're trying to look at the bigger picture and
Also grounded in
calm,
reality.
about it and analyse it rather than just be, swigging a beer and singing the songs and not giving a.
I heard about it. I mean, in the cold light of day, let's be brutal about it. He like Brendan Rodgers, like any other manager, has to go through a learning curve. You're always learning, you're always adapting. He got it wrong in the major championship, Hugh. He got it wrong. He made decisions which were too cautious, and we were there. He got it wrong.
He did.
And he's got to take that on board and say to himself, well, he must have sat down and said, well, listen, I've got some players who are going to come in who are going to make my life easier, who are younger players, who are giving me a problem for selection, but I've got to change the way I go about this.
I know, there was stuff that was baffling, as you know, I was in Germany and I was at every game in the sense that I was at a fan zone, and you get a real sense of it there, because even the press box at a game, you're removed from fans. You're standing amongst guys that have spent up to famously 10 grand for, and we noticed very early on, Germany, everybody took it, nobody's happy, they're not dancing, but Germany even getting spanked 5-1, everybody saying that was fair enough. Where it racked up was when we played Switzerland and Hungary, and I think the last 30 minutes against Hungary, where I was absolutely toxic, because people were screaming at a bit of plastic, next to a tree 100 yards away. Bring on anybody. Let's do something. This is not working. Change. And I thought it was interesting the other night there where he said about bringing off Doak because Doak was fatigued. And he said, I actually should have brought him off earlier. And I was wondering, well, we'll see if you're thinking bring him off early. Just bring him off early. Just do it. Be decisive. Because Hungary, the last half an hour against Hungary, I think was crazy stuff. I couldn't get my head around it.
I'm glad you've narrowed it down to Hungary. I thought Switzerland.
Yeah, but Hungary was all or nothing.
Yeah.
Hungary was
James Forrest was one for me. I just thought
get somebody who could get us up the park.
Exactly, and can set something up, or is capable of a goal from fashioning something from very, very little. And Scotland had so little creativity in that team that I think everyone was just clamouring, let's try something, let's see that there's
play 4-2-4 even.
Let's see an idea. Let's see something.
I watched that game and amongst Hungary fans that night, and even they were brilliant. They were wanting Scotland as well. It was like, if we lose and you go through, we're still going to be happy. They were brilliant. But even there was a couple of them beside us saying, why did your manager not do something? And we were standing there thinking, well, I'm not quite sure about that. I don't have an answer.
Give him a call.
Yeah.
Did you feel in any way torn by that, but because of your Hungarian mother and father that you were in that end? Why were you in the Hungary end?
Because it was the one that I could get tickets for. And I paid a heck of a lot of money for them.
I really had to work that out. I'm thinking,
that last half an hour hurt.
why is Moira there sitting on her hands?
Moira was the one it's toxic, giving them out.
I was quite happily displaying Scotland gear and flags. The guys were happy enough around about us.
Listen, I mean, at the end of the day, I quite like the fact we're in a playoff. I'd like to still play top tier teams. I think it attracts an audience. Lots of people want to come and support us. But by the same token, of all the failings of a major tournament, and I think Moira's right to point out, you don't make it. That's it. That the cold light of day for every one of us can be, yes, we've played some good football, defining moments. I think you're right to point out Grant Hanley, because that moment, we were if he hadn't made that challenge, we could all be sitting here saying, well, we're through.
So it's a fine lines. It's a fine lines at top level.
Yeah,
football,
absolutely.
Those moments. We've
played good football. I think I can see the strategy of, sometimes as many a manager tell you better being lucky than good.
Oh,
Lucky's Alec Ferguson, if you say to Alec Ferguson, as I have once said, what's the one defining trait? He said that, that made you, one of the greatest managers of all time. He says, I've been lucky. And he's not kidding. He says the second thing he always says is, well, it's my constitution as well. He says I can get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, even in my 80s, and go to my work. He said I've been blessed, God's blessed me with that, and things follow on from that. But luck plays such an incredible part in football. I mean, you look at, see the Scotland-Croatia game the other night. There had been winner takes all or something like that. First half, I thought Croatia were so comfortable. Should have been 2-0 up. I thought Scotland, you could be on a hiding here. Then a Croatian player makes 2 tackles. He doesn't really need to make, and they're down to 10 men.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's other things to add to that bar luck, but another referee might have said, I'll just let that one have a word and things like that. And it is the player's responsibility, and I get all that. And I get it the same way, it's players' responsibility if it's Hanley for going down.
Yeah.
There's things that add to it. But as a manager sitting there, there's so many factors going on in front of you at a higher level football that it makes it is a matter of fate at sometimes.
Well, there's a moment in the game where basically Portugal were winning and Billy Gilmore hits a 35-yarder and it crashes off the bar, and you're thinking, we've got no luck here. And then the other one hits the post, you think, we just get no luck here.
Even Hungary, even Hungary, we were dismal. We were dismal. It was one of the most depressing games I've watched. You know, there was no hope. What if we get that penalty?
I know.
Yeah,
What if we
absolutely.
get that?
No. And everything changes.
Everything changes.
Your whole perception of that entire tournament would
The whole
change.
perception of every, all games, you can sit and watch a game and you have any game of football, and then something happens, and then you go, oh, that's changed the whole narrative.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things that people say. It's, managers quite often point out, say, "Oh, but if that penalty going in, then your view of it would change." And it's like, yeah, it would, but would still also say to you, that's because you got the job done. Whether it's luck, whether it's somebody slapping it, whether it's hitting the bar. They know the size of the goals, so if it hits the bar, then aim a few inches lower the next time. And that's not trying to be harsh on people, it's just the fact that it does come down to getting, we've all seen bad teams get the job done and get through things. So it's like, I just want Scotland to get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in your camp in that. And give us your point of view on it. Are you optimistic for us qualifying for the World Cup? Certainly 3 different countries. It's going to be a slog for us, Hugh, but we're going to try and get there again. Just got to make sure that you're taking all your vitamins to make sure you're there with us.
I'll be happy to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
European Nations playoffs.
So give us your thoughts on that. We'd love to hear from you on that. Lots to talk about. Nicholas Kuhn will occupy our thoughts. Niels Coppin as well. The name Kenneth Vargas occupies our thoughts because, like everything, I think you've got to try and have a balance when a footballer comes out with a line that I hope he doesn't come back and say it's lost in translation, Moira. But Kenneth Vargas has made a point of saying he wants to play at a higher level, which is every footballer's right. And he's maybe not happy with the standard that he's playing in at the moment. What's your view on him?
I'd start by saying that every Hearts fan would want all of the Hearts players to be playing at a higher level than they are at the moment. But no, I hope it's something out of context, because I just think for a guy coming in here, he has pace, he has certain abilities, but he's still nowhere near consistent enough. He's still not got enough the other elements to his game. His decision making still not good enough. So there's elements of his game that aren't good enough for Scottish Premiership level at the moment, but he still has other parts to his game that compensates for that and gets him a place in the team. But it's a team that's not performing well. So I always feel if you're going to come out with something like that, do it when you're, if Nicholas Kuhn was coming out with that at the moment, you'd say, well, maybe fair enough. But when you're a team that's struggling to get off the bottom of the table at the moment, you're not contributing. It's not like you're the standout player in that team, pulling them through matches. I think you should keep your mouth shut at that point. I don't think.
I hope it's not lost in translation, Moira, and because he raises a very good point that I think it's quite easy for us all to steam in and beat him over the head with a baseball bat. 2 points on it. The actual standard of the football is not great, Hugh. There's no point in trying to cover it up. Last year, we were all absolutely on this programme, highly critical of the standard out with Celtic and possibly Rangers to a lesser degree. But the standard of the other teams was absolutely woeful. We were going to cold grounds on a Wednesday night up and watching Livingston Aberdeen and thinking, my God, they're playing football from a different era. So the standard's not great, and it has to improve to see other clubs make a really good effort at getting into European group stages, Europa League, that would be a start for most of them. So that's the first thing. I think he's perfectly entitled to offer that opinion on the overall standard of player. But I've seen him regularly. I wouldn't put my mortgage on him one-on-one with a goalkeeper, because I think this season and last season, he's 9 goals last season, 2 goals this season. He has not. He's one of those players in that Hearts side that I'm thinking you could go tomorrow.
Yeah, I think but the standard I agree. The standard of Scottish football has gone down, and it will continue to go down because other countries will have more money than Scotland has in the games. The quality of the game is by and large determined by money. There'll be wee outliers, but by and large. But you're talking about standard of the game. Standard of the game didn't do too badly for Miofsky, did it? He went to Serie A. Doesn't do too bad for likes of Nicky Devlin. He goes into an international team, but didn't do too bad for Matt O'Reilly. Matt O'Reilly, 25 million down the road to the Premier League. And it's not doing too bad at the moment for a guy that plays in the same position as Vargas, Nicholas Kuhn, that Nagelsmann is saying, we're looking at him, he could get in, you know what, he could get into a German squad. So there's two arguments. Yes, you've got to be, you're in a league which is you know, of certainly a substandard to certainly, obviously, the 5 big leagues, but perhaps even to Holland and Portugal. But you're still in a league where if you do well, you can get recognised, and that is your pride. That's you. That's you. That's down to you. It's not down to whether there's so many coefficient points in the league or it's whatever. It's down to you to do your best every day in this league and progress, and that's what players have done. I talked to Neil McFarlane, the under-19 coach, who's also at Brentford on Saturday. I talked to him at Capello. It was really interesting to get certain things reinforced in your mind, and you said if you had to give one thing to it, I mean, there's some good players there, Lennon Miller, Cummins with Celtic, Bailey Rice, there's some really good under-19 players, Oni of Sheffield United, etc. So you've got to give them one thing to say to them, this will get you to the next stage. What would it be? He said, attitude. It didn't take a second to say it. He went, attitude. That's what's going to get them to the next level.
Yeah.
It encompasses a lot. You know, encompasses character, commitment, dedication, not blaming outside forces, saying this is down to me. And I think that's where Vargas has gone really wrong.
Yeah, well, there's a double edge on this, Ali. Should he have kept his mouth shut? If I'm a journalist, I'm thinking, no, there's steam in there.
No,
Give us an opinion.
No, exactly. Well, you're allowed to disagree with his opinion. We want to hear it.
Yeah.
But we're allowed
should
to
he have
then
kept his
battle
mouth shut for
it.
going back into the dressing room?
Well, if you're asking us as journalists, never, right? We're never going to turn around and say, no, you know, give us an anodyne answer. However, if you're within the club right now, you're absolutely telling him to keep it shut and just do his talking on the park. However, I think you'll find it was lost in translation. I think what you will find is that there is a gross misunderstanding and misjustice being perpetrated by sensationalist headlines. I think we've all lived that movie. But yeah, I agree. I just think if you're going to come out with that kind of talk, you need to be on it. You need to be performing, and you need
see if Cooney get on the back of a man of the match performance in the Champions League.
Yeah, you can see, because everyone's working their ticket. That's the reality of our league. Is that everyone is working their ticket.
If a player said, "I don't want to play at a better level," you'd worry about their ambition or about what they're aiming for. Every player wants to play at a better level.
And you see it at every level.
Moving up that levels to show that you are worth it. And if you haven't, then you just keep your mouth shut.
The clubs are running that as well. Celtic,
Of course,
Celtic are going, not looking at Cooney and going, "Oh, we're going to lose," and we're going, "Yes."
That's why
That's our model.
That's
why we've paid £4 million.
And then there was another one.
Next.
Yes, exactly.
Ambition
that's this year's one.
That's this year's model. Is next year's model going to be Alistair Johnson? Next year's model.
Ambition can't be wrong, but belittling the people that are paying money
that's
and
that's
turning
the
up and paying or standing alongside you on a pitch, that's when it oversteps it.
But in the cold light of day, Moira, and you and I have sat in the press box at Tynecastle on more than a few occasions this season and last season. Am I being unkind to him? I don't think he's capable of going to a higher level.
I think he's a player that has a little bit of promise, but I think for a striker, he doesn't. I agree with you. I would never bet when he's through. You don't want to necessarily fault him. If he doesn't have time to think about it, He can finish sometimes. If he has a moment to think about it, then he kind of struggles. He's got pace. He is definitely improving as a player, but he's nowhere near the level yet that he can be saying, I'm so much better than this round about me. You know, I need to be out of here. As I say, have the ambition to say, I want to play higher, fair enough. And he has been improving. And he has qualities like pace that most managers would love in players, that if you can fine-tune the other aspects of their game, it's a great asset. But don't, until you've started improving more than he has at the moment, say, I'm too good for this and I need out of here. You know, that's not going to win you any favours from fans or from your teammates or for opposition players. And
with the aforementioned player that you threw into the argument, Nicholas Kuhn, nice to hear Nagelsmann say that. Boy, he's transformed himself this season. I notice that I think it's Christian Erlinger has said there's no need for him to move in January.
Very clever.
You know, it's just fantastic, isn't it?
But it's great agent work. I mean, I read the transcript of his stuff, read every word, and he's praising Celtic. He's even praising Celtic's chief executive by name. Michael's doing this and that. And just say, see, agents get a really bad name, and there are bad agents now, and there's agents that are just worth the money. But see, a good agent changes an athlete's life. If you look at, worldwide, an agent that can say to you, this is our strategy for you, and this is what we're going to get you to. You know, you're an under-19 Scotland player, but we're going to get you the Premier League in 6 years. And this is a strategy how we get you there. And the whole strategy about Kuhn, and sometimes the strategy doesn't work out, but at least it's a strategy. And the whole thing about Kuhn is it's so, what's the word for it? The strategy has been perfect, but the execution has been really good. And it's been a real football story. Like 6 months ago, if you'd went round, this is football, right? I'm not talking about 6 years or, in the Ice Age. 6 months ago, you're talking about to Celtic supporters. What about Kuhn? Oh, another dud,
the
recruitment this, recruitment that, recruitment this. 6 months on, people are saying, well, it breaks the transfer record. Not take 25 for him. So that, we talked about football, and it's a strategy. It goes back to the thing we talked about, they're human beings as well. They come from a different country. They have Kuhn has teeth problems. He's got to settle in a different country, a different league, a different manager. And when they settle down, you say, what a difference. I mean, I watched them live against Leipzig, and I was, honestly, Pierre, I was astonished, because it was like, this is a bona fide top-level champion.
Give me the ball. Just give me the ball. Give him the ball.
Get the ball to him. Get him to get every decision, pace. And you went, phew.
And of course, Celtic will play this right. I think timing could work in their favour, Alison, because as Erlinger says, there's no need to sell him in January. The reason why is quite simply this structure of this Champions League takes you into
the end of January.
And then you get to that possible playoff, and suddenly he's looking and saying, wait a minute, February, if Celtic were in a playoff in the Champions League, this guy's stock could go even higher.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of points to that. The first is that he moved to Celtic in January, and you saw that you never got the best out of him until he had a proper pre-season. So you might not fancy doing another mid-season switch. I think it's always difficult for players when you're going into an established team halfway through a campaign. As you've seen repeatedly, I think a couple of months to settle and a full pre-season gives you a different player entirely. The second aspect, the Champions League one, the Champions League is where he will make his proper addition. If he wants to make it into that German team, if there is any real chance of him going in and making it into the national team, he knows he'll be judged on Champions League performances. It's not going to be on scoring a couple of goals at Rugby Park or on scoring against Hearts at Tynecastle. It will be on what he does against high-level opposition that will catch the eye. And we have seen it repeatedly with players in Scotland who maybe do it every week, but you're being ignored by maybe England managers or those further afield. So he knows it'll have to be the Champions League environment where he has to do it. I don't think Celtic will sell him in January. I think they'll wait. I think in the summer there'll be a decision to be made on it, but I think he'll play the full campaign.
I mean, another thing about it as well, Ali, is I mean, I thought when we signed you full time for PLZ, I thought you hit the ground running, you settled well. Hugh thought it took 6 months to get the best out of you, and I was arguing with him consistently.
It took me a year to get in the door. After the steps.
That was a stair lift, isn't it?
I'd put a stairmaster in for me, Moira.
You've been here since the start, though. You didn't tell everybody that. You've been here since the very start. Yeah, I mean, listen, and a perfect time to sell them, Moira, in the summer. The only problem I would say, I think Celtic fans rightly get a little bit miffed when they see a player and then suddenly we're all discussing his sale. Celtic strategy will look and say, well, wait a minute, we can maybe punt one out the door at 25 million. You can't punt him and Hatate.
At the end of the day, though, we talk about it because players are that good or have earned the right to be talked about and moving on. It goes back to the earlier point about players have expectations to play at higher levels. And
it's also Celtic's selling point. It's a big part of the process of bringing them. Here we give you the opportunity. If you perform well here, there'll be a move on. So when that comes, I think it's unfair to then stand in the way of a player. That's part of the whole appeal of the club, is it offers an opportunity to go to a higher level.
The more that you get players going and doing that, the more you get quality younger players coming in as well. Celtic fans might be upset about it, but at the same time, if that player goes for 25 million, the next player goes for 30 million, or you've got another at 20, players in Europe are looking and thinking, actually, that's a route in. I can go there, I can get European football, I can get, hopefully, medals while I'm there, and I've got a shop window, and people are looking at knowing there's a proven track record of players moving from there to better clubs and being able to cut it.
I think it's part of Celtic's marketing themselves when they go and try and attract players. Yeah. Here you come, this is what we offer. And I think Celtic fans, I think they know it now. I think you have seen it for, the guts of 2 decades really now, that you see it and you see the effectiveness of it. It's not without criticism at times. The criticism will be, do you spend that money that you bring it? We all know what goes on round about it, but I think there's an acceptance. This is how the club operates, and you would be hard-pressed to say it's not been successful.
Yeah, but here's the conundrum, and again, a learning curve that we've been in the movie before with Brendan Rodgers. Hugh, he wants to, and we only have to look at the evidence of the last 6 months to the year, he wants to bring in a certain calibre of player that will allow him to make them better players, get Celtic to the level where the remit was why he was brought back. But then you get to a balancing act where you're saying to yourself, yes, Nicholas Kuhn's a sellable asset, yes, Rio Hatate's a sellable asset. Then you get the situation where suddenly 2 or 3 players have been promised the moves. I give you the French connection from the last time around in Brendan's time, and that's a difficult part for a club. Keeping some, letting some go, then you that's the balancing act.
It's hugely difficult, and it's like everything else. See, when you write down a strategy, and Celtic's strategy has been bang on. It's been bang on. Even if you look at it, even now, everybody's talking, even a year ago, about all the duds they've brought in. All the duds now are, Palmer, we just call Palmer, everybody now would say, Louis Palmer's a dud. He scored 2 goals against Mexico at the weekend. Whatever he is, ain't a dud. He might not be good enough for Celtic. It might be this or that or the next thing. Went for 3 million. Kwon, who was derided, can't be it. He's playing for South Korea. I don't know, made his debut for South Korea. I mean, these are good players. These are players that will settle on. Celtic sold on Lawal, who I don't know how many Celtic players even caught eyes on him for over £2 million. So there's a real strategy there. But the strategy, as you say, has got huge difficulties when it meets reality, because you're going to have to sell these guys.
Yeah, at some point. And at some point,
you're not bringing in. It's not like Liverpool selling Salah and then going out and buying Mbappe or trying to get Mbappe.
You don't go like for like. You go back to the bottom.
You go back to go and say we buy a Kuhn.
Yeah.
And then you've got 6 months of saying, what are you bringing in this Kuhn for? He's useless.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I think the season where it didn't work, the one season where Celtic bucked their own system, was the season where they lost to 10 in a row, where they say to Edward, give us one more season. You go and you see a couple of players that are agitating to go, look, this is a big campaign, stay with us. And then you see the effects of that. You see how difficult it is when people have gone, when their heart is left it.
And it doesn't take much. It goes from 100 to 99.
And you really saw it. And that was the first time.
Right. Cham, Edouard, Dembele, that whole period.
Christie.
Christie. Once that your head is
it's
gone,
there's gone.
And Niels Coppin comes in, and suddenly he has to. I think he's got the toughest job, Moira. I mean, I listened to the interview, and of course, he's going to try and oversee the club's strategy. He's got to try and hopefully help the manager in that January transfer window. Boy, the one thing though, for all his qualities that John Gilligan said that he has portrayed, controlling the narrative when the team's not winning, that's going to be mightily difficult for him.
Exactly, and especially, I mean, you look at the gap at the moment, if that gap was to continue to grow, even going in and trying to sell players, to buy players, you're looking at them and saying, right, one, you've got to clear out some of the duds that are there to make room for it and to afford it. You're then going up against, as we've established, Celtic have got a strategy, they've got those connections with players and agents where they know they can come there, be a success, move on. Everything's there and in place at Celtic at the moment. So Rangers are going to have, they've got so much catching up, and not just in terms of where they are in the league, but that's a massive, thing to overcome when you're going and trying selling players or selling a strategy to people and saying, this gap's already there. We're possibly still a major gap in third place, let alone in second place. Come in, try and help us make it right at a time where, fans are fed up as well. They've not got the most patience at the moment either. So players are looking at the whole thing to come in. Everybody in the football department are, it's quite toxic in a way roundabout it at the moment, and what they're trying to, fill the void between them and Celtic and Aberdeen. So he's got a bit of, you said it was a task. It's one heck of a task.
Well, it is a task, and I'm not surprised that they've said, well, you're director of football and you're now technical director, because they're obviously going to try. I wouldn't get caught up in whether they're saving money or not on it. They've just given him a role and said, right, you can still do that role, but here's the other part of it as well. Help the manager. And his words, everything is underway to prepare for the January window. It's quite an important one for the first team, which leads you to believe that his immediate remit is, listen, you need to juggle, get players out, get players in, as Moira's mentioned there, to try and bridge the gap and make sure that Rangers are in that second spot for the battle for that 60 million.
I think there will be immediate short-term goals, and then there will be a long-term vision. Whether or not it comes to fruition, that long-term vision will very much depend on what happens in the short term. So I think yes, I think Rangers will finish second. I just think they have the resources to go and finish second. They have an ability in January to go out and bring in players. I think over the course of a campaign, I do think they should be finishing second. However,
are you discounting Aberdeen?
With a 9 point, given that what it's gone to, I think this is now, there's a plausible question, can Aberdeen go and do it? Because again, there's contacts that Jimmy Tillene may have in Scandinavia too, that he can come in and improve. And you've seen the players that he brought in the summer anyway. But I think there has to be a long-term recruitment initiative that mirrors what Celtic have done. I think it's the only sustainable way for any Scottish club is to really bring in players at a certain level, improve them and sell them on. But that depends on two things. It depends on a manager and a coach getting the best out of them, bringing them in. And I think where you see a good manager is someone who improves a player. That's where you can judge the quality of the coaching, and the team gets better overall too. So I think his remit will be very much a long-term strategy to try and also in decision making. I think Rangers had the opportunity to do this with players. They had the opportunity to cash in on Morelos, on Kent, decided to stay, and then lost money that they could ill afford at that time by saying, we're not going to cash in our chips just now, we're going to go and try and keep them. I think in some ways his remit will be in making those kind of decisions and knowing when to make them.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think he will be front and centre of any criticism. I think he can still continue his role in the background, Hugh. The interesting thing will be, I don't know who Niels Coppin's, somebody you can compare in a similar job at Aberdeen, but surely with a 9 point gap, they must be looking now, as all international football's gone, they must be looking and thinking if they can get any kind of advantage going into the January transfer window, what a great gamble it would be to speculate to try and see off Rangers.
See, this is the problem. The problem with Rangers always go back to any problem with Rangers at the moment goes back to there is no money. They just lost 17 million with the chairman saying, "Do you know what? It's not going to get any better." So
And you have the manager every week coming out and saying, "I need to cut the wage bill.
I need to cut the budget." So people saying like the normal panacea for this, and it's not a great window anyway. January, as we know, the normal panacea for us, for an old Rangers under that, would be let's hammer it. Let's get. I mean, even like they did it with limited success as well. Let's get an Aaron Ramsey and let's get a Diallo. But let's go for it. That's not an option at the moment.
Yeah,
the option is to cut the budget. Aberdeen, on the other hand, are sitting there with an owner who's a fan, who's I think it'd be harsh to say ego, but he certainly his self-worth is tied very closely to the club, shall we say. He's got a manager, who's Alison said, knows a market whose season has finished, largely finished.
It's easier for him to get into battle with him because
you trust him. He's earned their trust.
The chairman said, the owner of the club said, apart from the field, we've had 4 sellouts at home, or this or that, we got this SML, we got tanked, but we got there.
And a huge...
This guy's done it. And if this guy's saying that Nielsen boy, I know he's a bit old now, he's done a job. I've got somebody at 22 there that could be it. Go.
And you think there's a huge incentive to Champions League qualifier.
Exactly. It's an interesting time for them. It'll be interesting to see what Niels Coppin is able to do in that January transfer window to help the manager. And of course what reaction will come from Aberdeen. And of course the good thing is that international football is now in hibernation and we can now get into the meat and bones of people getting angry over nothing. The other
We're
thing
all good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing at Scottish football which I think is worrying is the Dumbarton situation, which has reared its ugly head. Quite simply, they have offered up various off-the-record suggestions as to maybe why Dumbarton find themselves in this predicament. There's always, I think, an underlying situation which kind of can go against a club, which is maybe Dumbarton looking to try and sell, housing area. That deal didn't quite come to fruition. The council certainly scuppered anything they were hoping to do there. They have obviously been talking about the possibility of some clubs not recovering the same incomes since COVID, Moira. And some things that we don't actually take into consideration is not only rising costs of players, rising costs of operating, and then you've got a situation, even bounce back loans. You have to pay. All of these things come into it, but they don't come into a fan's equation. And when you're operating a tight budget like Dumbarton, those fine margins can send you over the edge.
No, I mean, it's tough for football clubs in Scotland to operate. I mean, you look across Europe and compare us in terms of fans turning up through the gates, but that doesn't sustain a club. There's advertising revenues are down for everybody because every company's suffering through, recessions and COVID and everything. Everybody's taking time to recover.
Yeah.
So there's such a knock-on effect for football clubs. And, passion and a fan's love for a club doesn't pay the bills, So they find it hard to, balance that out with what's happening at a club. But I think we're going to find a spell where there's a few clubs going to be struggling at the moment. There's, as you said, there's very fine margins and they don't have huge surplus behind them that they can, pull on, and anything they've used through COVID and through getting back on their feet again. So, and I think, and again, if 1 or 2 clubs go through it, they're maybe not paying the bills to the other clubs. So that then has a knock-on effect. It becomes a domino, So I think it's a wee bit of concern. And we've seen this before. There's been spells where you've seen 1 or 2 clubs suffer and then football seems to have got itself back on its feet and everything righted again. And then whether it's global recessions, whether it's Ukraine wars, whether it's, Brexit and God knows what that we all blame, there's something happens that then has a little flurry of, a few clubs all finding trouble. Some of them will maybe get their way through it just, and others, unfortunately, have to go into administration.
It's one of the oldest clubs, Hugh, and the other thing about it...
years, I went to their celebrations on...
They're surviving on SPFL payments and sponsorship to try and keep them afloat. The SPFL payments I think, keep a lot of clubs in a situation where they wouldn't be able to operate.
Yep, and it's the UEFA payments that are going to come down the line as well. I mean, should there be a restructuring of that? Probably should be. Will there be a restructuring of that? No, because the clubs will then have to vote to give other clubs what they see as their money. So that's not going to happen anytime soon until you get a football administrator with executive powers.
Which
is
can't,
not
because you're going to
to
vote
happen.
against it.
It's not going to happen anytime soon because the clubs can vote against it.
Yeah. Is it time, though, that clubs like Dumbarton have to realise and change the strategy? Because they were talking about, 2 years ago we're paying a player 150 quid. Now we're paying him 300. Well, if you are going to survive as a club, is it time to change your strategy to say, look, the aspirations of a Dumbarton is to try and develop young players and not get to that situation where you're maybe overspending? Or is it just the circumstances that we all have to take into consideration that maybe deals that they were trying to get in place have fallen foul of it? I give you Inverness Cally Thistle. Strike a deal for concerts. One concert doesn't happen, suddenly you're in big bother.
The thing as well is what you've got as well is all this pressure from above with payments and bigger clubs taking the bigger chunk, etc. But you've got real force from the bottom, from the pyramid. The pyramid has got a real force now. Dumbarton, I can tell you off the top of my head, there'll be teams much below them in pyramids will have bigger budgets and will be playing players much more than they're getting at Dumbarton.
Yeah.
So inevitably, if players are what ensures your performance in the league, the trapdoor then becomes a possibility. And once certain clubs go through the trapdoor, history doesn't suggest, history tells you if you go through the trapdoor, you don't come back. Now, there might be clubs, East Stirlingshire might come back, Berwick Rangers might come back, Cowdenbeath might come back, Albion Rovers might come back, but they ain't come back since, right? So what's happening is you're seeing a real realignment of clubs where they're 150 years old, 100 years old, etc., etc., etc. They're facing pressure from both sides. They're facing people from below with ambition, with money, with sponsorship, with community status, with really clever people on the board. I mean, I think, for example, Spartans would be a great example of this, a real club, a real strategy, real community base, a real footfall, and smart people. I mean, real smart people at the top, and they come up, and there's clubs that I know that are in this, and that's where your Dumbartons, Clyde, your Hamilton Accies, they've all talked about problems. That's where their real existential threat comes from.
Yeah, of course, the last thing you want to see is them disappear from existence. I suppose there's a few out there thinking, I could build a block of flats right there and it overlooks the Dumbarton Rock. What a fantastic view. But what we want is we want to see them survive. Whether they can do that or not, only time will tell. It's a long, choppy road ahead, and suddenly with that 15-point deduction.
15-point deduction's a killer. It absolutely kills you.
Does them in.
It really does. I think that just it leaves you with nowhere to go.
Okay, we'll keep our eye on that.
There's no. It's your final nail.
Yeah.
Really.
Use are a barrel of laughs, by the way.
They can go down, regroup, find their level. Fans of Dumbarton will always be fans of Dumbarton.
Yeah.
You know, whether same as Spartans fans were fans of them in the Lowland League or the East of Scotland League, and they've now followed them up. You know, so people will find a level as long as they survive. You want every club to survive.
There is a business
For a community.
There's a business sense, and then there's the meritocracy of it all, which is quite simply, if you've got a club like Spartans that suddenly starts to, seize the opportunity. Sometimes it can be the detriment of another club that's got a great history, but it counts for nothing, Hugh.
Yeah, I mean, these clubs have got strategy. I mean, one of the other, I think one of the great stories was Bonnie Rigg, who a junior club and no real outside sugar daddies or anything like that. Very much the same committee, the same people drove them out, and they've had their problems. I mean, going on about the ludicrous decision over that. But what you got to look, there's a reverse story to this. Yeah, you pine for Dumbartons, you look at Inverness Callies, Clyde, I seem to have stabilised a wee bit, you pine for all that. But there's people in Bonnyrigg, there's people in Kelty, there's people in Cove who will tell you, you know what, this is magic.
Yeah. And let's not forget also, by the way, that even in the top flight, a lot of our clubs, in a business sense, long for the money that comes from Celtic or Rangers doing well in Europe.
Or even just a cup run, getting one of the two of them in the cup, and before you know it, you've got a chunk of income coming in that sustains you for the next 12 months.
You know, Falkirk this season, I mean, they would look at whatever they go
Celtic
from
Park.
Celtic Park, man, and they go, well, let's change their budget.
It's a real bonus.
Let's all take a big deep breath.
Just before we finish, always like reading magazines that give us a wee insight into lists.
I wonder where you were going there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Read those. He just looks
start
at
to hear the
the
beeping
pictures.
in the reverse line there. But 442. Oh wow. 442 is a magazine. I don't know about you, Hugh, and I'll get to the top 30 managers in the world, but there was a generation who absolutely would. I mean, 442 when it first came out, I had to make sure I had all the numbers of it. I think I might have got to about 100, and then you just can't keep up with it.
I can go back even further. I mean, and it's great because it's on Twitter a lot now. Is Shoot. I go by Shoot, and on a Saturday, my great job in Shoot was to go out with my brother, and he'd buy Shoot, and I'd buy a magazine called Goal, and we thought this was luxury.
I was a Roy the Rovers magazine as well. But 442,
wasn't it? You can tell that. You can just tell that.
Listen, Moira, when there's a minute left and Blackie Gray crosses the ball for Roy to head into the back of the net, you
know it. You pay your mortgage on it.
You've got to believe it, yeah. Because if it was Blackie Gray crossing it over to Kenneth Vargas, I'm not too sure Melchester Rovers would have been in the cup final.
Half and half, Hearts and Melchester.
Vargas can only dream of playing that level.
Exactly. So 442, and I know Ali hates it, which is why I tend to, on a regular basis, I work out ways at how I can piss Ali off.
You've been successful.
Sometimes it's just when you say hello to her.
So at this point,
on a daily level,
yes, top 10 list. The 442 have given us the top 30 managers, but I thought we haven't got time for that. But there's 10. So Thomas Tuchel's number 10. Do you want to fire in what you think might be in that top 10 list of the best managers in the world right now?
I'm going to guess Pep will be number 1.
Okay, you're going number 1 on that. Anybody else in there that you think?
Ancelotti. I think Ancelotti might have been my number 1. He's got to be fairly high up.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Throw in any.
Amarin and Clarke will be in it.
Amarin?
He'll be in it. I think he's got. I would put Gasperini of Atalanta in it because I think he's one of these coaches whose CV might not be laden with gold, but is Bielsa.
You've managed to name 4 that are nowhere near the top 10.
Really?
That is fantastic how you fired that in. Moira, do you want to have a wee stab at
Something like Pochettino or something like that. I always think in these kind of lists as anybody that's done something in English football.
That's I know.
As well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. It's an English-based magazine.
Exactly.
Of course, they're going to favour anybody there. But
Alonso?
Thomas Tuchel, Xabi Alonso's in there. Thank you, Alison. Yes.
Yeah, Alonso should be in there.
Yeah. So Thomas Tuchel is number 10. I'll read the list out, and then you can start arguing. Thomas Tuchel, Arne Slot.
Yep.
Diego Simeone.
Yep.
Which you've got to give him that, haven't you? Scaloni.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. You happy with that? Emery.
Yeah.
Inzaghi, Simone. Mikel Arteta, Xabi Alonso, Carlo Ancelotti, and Guardiola.
I'm not having Arteta.
I wouldn't have Arteta anywhere near the top 10.
Certainly not in the top 4.
Yeah.
I'm not having it. What's he won?
Exactly.
Maybe judged on what you've done.
Yeah. I actually think, I wonder, and this is the amazing thing about it. I mean, we talk about it, and this is Moira, we talk about give managers time and let them build something. You know, after 2004 on that big wall around Arsenal Stadium, I was thinking to myself, God, but you know, fair play to Arsene Wenger. Arsene Wenger was allowed time because he managed to get them in top 4 continually, paid off the stadium quicker than they should have. But they didn't win anything, really. They won an FA Cup, but other than that, they stuck by him. I wonder when there's a point where you eventually say to Arteta, listen, you've built it, you've had two really good chances to take Man City out of the equation.
I think given the normal environment for managers and the fact they're given 2 weeks before pressures on them, if any manager out there has ever offered an Arsenal job, you would take it in a heartbeat because this only job that seems to offer you any kind of long-term security. It's,
So I thought Wenger at the end got away with murder. I mean, I'm in Mourinho's camp in this, I mean, I know Mourinho didn't like him, but I mean, I thought the end for Arsenal was when, as a top club, real top club, and they've never come back to being the top club, was when Wenger said, being in the top four is winning a trophy. And if you think I'm being harsh, could you ever imagine those words coming out of Clarke, Alex Ferguson, Simeone, whatever? They might all have to settle for top four, but they would never, ever entertain the idea that finishing fourth was a trophy.
And
It's also
voiced it.
I was just about to say it's a really dangerous thing to say that publicly.
Yeah.
It really gives you.
But I think what was in his favour was over that period from 2004 onwards, there was a real power struggle at boardroom level at Arsenal, and over and above that, while he continually maybe underachieved and didn't get the ultimate trophy, what he was able to do was deliver packed houses and top four finishes, which paid that stadium off.
Absolutely.
Which I think bought him time in a business sense. Where people
absolutely.
thought, by the way, if we suddenly are paying off this stadium and we've got an inexperienced manager comes in and it all crashes around us. So I thought that bought him time.
I was going to say, I don't know whether it's Arsenal fans have come to accept that, that mentality. Because, again, Arteta comes in, he challenges for a while, everybody thinks, this could be, got us so close, maybe next time. But how long do you give him the maybe next time and maybe the next time?
I think he's dropped off this season again.
But I think they have that one early spell, and Wenger had it at the beginning as well, and he had it early doors as well. And as soon as they do that, they have that little bit of hope and a possibility, they just seem to get, a fairly easy ride and a long-term contract.
Can we argue over 1 and 2, Moira? Ancelotti and Guardiola, would you switch them?
I probably would,
I'm a Guardiola sceptic.
Are you?
Aye. Only on the basis of if you're going to be a great manager, you've got to overachieve. And he's never been in a position where he's had to overachieve. He's had unprecedented, relentless success, but with teams that should have. I mean, if you're managing,
You've got to give him credit for the way they play, Hugh.
Yeah, fine. But I mean, I would like to see him try to do that at Capello.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I mean, if I'm saying,
Under pressure, can you get?
What would you do under pressure? How do you play out from the back when you don't have Rodri, Guardiola, a goalkeeper who could play at a decent level as an outfield player? How do you stick to a passing game when you haven't got Xavi and Iniesta? How do you want
to adapt? That's the thing, where you're adaptable.
I mean, he's probably a genius. I think he's a genius coach. There's no doubt about it. But there's other things to being a manager. Is Ancelotti as savvy about inverted fullbacks and number 6s, number 8s? Probably not. But Ancelotti's career just of constant achievement and managing that Real Madrid dressing room.
And he has
It's man management, I think, is what makes him special. And I think the really top managers have that man management that others can play a tactics board and can do, but you have to
I'm not having Guardiola because he's now responsible for, if you go to a third division game, like the people are trying to play out for the back. So that's why he's definitely not going to my number one.
The threat now of Guardiola having to take over at Morton
just to prove himself.
It's a real problem.
News coming through, Pep's just quit football.
on a cold Wednesday night.
Wouldn't it be a great reality TV thing? I mean, they don't need it for the money.
It's like that.
Imagine getting Pep as a season in the Scottish Championship.
Do you know, what was one of the old adverts? Is it Ronaldo turns up to the Sunday League team and he's everything's like that?
Roberto Carlos.
Was it?
He ended up playing for a Sunday League team as part of a competition.
That's right.
I can't quite see that happening in Greenock. Just for the mere driving him through
But
it.
it's currently -3.
Corniche down there where he can walk. along the Clyde.
Esplanade.
The Esplanade.
Exactly.
along the
And if you look over there at that castle, that's where we're housing you. Anyway, it's not going to happen, but it was lovely to give us the top 10 and we can argue over it. Always good to have Moira on, and Hugh and Alison. Hopefully you enjoy the Journos. You might not agree with all the opinion, but at least it gives you some talking points that you can fire back in the comments section below. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. We're delighted if you could join the football family. From everyone here on the Journos, thank you for listening and watching.